Thanks a lot, Neil. Okay, thanks a lot for coming. Then I'm going to the outline directly. Then I would briefly introduce why I'm interested in study brain development. Then I will discuss a bit results on air pollution related to brain development. I will jump to what happens about ambient temperature exposure related to brain development, and I will just finish on highlighting some opportunities and future directions. Then why brain development? There is several examples, but I always like to pick up this one. That was Minamata 1956. Then all in a sudden, it was this outbreak of an unknown disease of the central nervous system. Then all in a sudden, children start having symptoms of ataxia, general muscle weakness, damage of vision, hearing, and speech. And even in the extreme cases, they had paralysis, coma, and death. And it happened, it was a factory that was releasing huge amount of mercuries to the sea. And this was in the Minamata village here. They were ingesting, because you know Japanese population has a high ingest of fish. This fish was highly contaminated with mercury. But the lesson here was that in all the cases, the mother was healthy. That was the one ingesting the fish. But where the baby is born, that started presenting the symptoms. Then we learn here that the brain has all this development during pregnancy, which is crucial for our later brain mental health, cognitive functioning, our life. And I'm quoting Professor Philip Granjan in his book that he said we only have one chance to develop a brain, because it has been shown that if you have some external insult in some moments during pregnancy, maybe the brain cannot recover anymore. Even the brain is very plastic, and sometimes this is not the case, but it could happen. Then gestation and also the first years of life are very, very crucial for protecting the brain of our children, because we want that our children are performing during all their entire life with their brain fully functioning. Then what do we know about air pollution? This was one of the first studies that it was quite creative, but it was one of the first showing an association between air pollution and brain. A lesion. They took children and dogs from Mexico City and from a village far away from Mexico City in a very rural area, which you might know the levels of air pollution in Mexico City still are very high and very low in the rural area. And then they compare cognitive functioning in both groups, but they also took children that had a dog. They wait until the dog died, and they did autopsies to the dog in the brain. And they were the first finding some lesions. You cannot really appreciate it here, but some lesions of the white matter. And this was one of the first putting out this hypothesis that air pollution could have direct effect into the brain. Then how the air pollution is reaching our brain? It has been described with multiple in vitro and animal studies so far. We can have the direct pathway here. We are breathing, and here we can just directly going through the brain, like other toxins, like you can get intoxicated also with other toxins, and also the respiratory intakes. It goes through the lungs, and then we can have inflammation, and the circulating inflammation go to the blood-brain barrier, that it can cross it, but also some particles could also have a direct transport. It has been shown, and then it can have a different type of brain inflammation, oxidative stress. But recently, it has been shown that it also can cross the placenta barrier, and it can affect the fetus while the fetus is developing. Then it's not only going through the brain, but also the fetus could be affected during pregnancy. Then how do we assess this? We have a cohort study. We are following these families. How can we see if air pollution is affecting? We cannot, we could wait until people are dying and look at the autopsy like the dogs, but we try to do which instruments, no? We can have psychologists. This is expensive, but they could have, they have different tools, and they can evaluate the children for 1 hour, and one after another. This actually was in our cohort. This was the PI of the cohort, was sitting in all the evaluations for 1 hour, and the children were sitting in their lap, well, to make it more comfortable that the child was responding, because you need the child for 1 hour following the psychologist all the tests. And you can think about all the limitations that might have this. If the child is gets tired, is it because their cognition is not performing well, or is just getting tired? Then now, lately, we have some computer tests that have been developed. This is more fun for children. They think, or we are making them think they are playing, but we are trying to test their attention function, or with their short-term memory. There are some fishes on the screen or some animals, and they need to respond. And this is good, but not everything can be tested like that. And we also have questionnaires that we can ask. There is multiple reporting, the mother, the father, or the partner of the mother, the teacher, the child himself. And here we have, like, for example, if the child is restless, overactive, cannot stay still long. These are for hyperactive scale. You can imagine the reporting bias we can have depending on the respondent. The mother always thinks the child is restless, and the teacher, for some of these symptoms, might be a better reporter. Then this also you can have a sense of the different reporting bias we can get with this data. The best would be to have multi-informant, but this is becoming very expensive also and time-consuming. Then there have been a lot of studies on air pollution and all this type of scales that I show now. I present one that I think is very beautiful. They took 40 schools in Barcelona, 20 located in the highest air polluted area, 20 located in the lowest air polluted area, and they assess during a year 4 times this cognitive test, this computer. The picture I show was from this study. And they could show, this is working memory. These were children between 7 and 10 years old. They pick up this test because at that age, children are supposed to mature on this function, and they need to be growing and improving. Then this would be the expected curve of working memory that you would expect in a children of this age. And these are the schools located to the lower pollution area. And here we have the schools in the higher polluted area. They already started in a lowest point, but they also grow slower than we would expect, that we would like that our children would grow, no? Because you want that children are growing in their own potential. Then this study show very nicely air pollution associated to these cognitive functions. I will not summarize all the literature. There is quite a mix back of results. It depends on the cognitive test or the mental health measure. It could be a lot of reasons why there is no consistency, but it's a mix, I would say in summary, it's a mix findings. Then another way, we cannot wait, well, we could wait, but to do an autopsy, but we could try to look at the brain, looking at MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. This is innocuous. Then ethics committee allows us to do this in healthy population. Then you need to get the mothers and the family accept to put their kid 40 minutes in a scan. It's extremely noisy. And then we can assess, this is what we mainly assess, the macrostructure, what we call the brain morphology, how the brain, how is the structure, the gray matter, the white matter. We can calculate volumes, we can calculate the cortex is the thinner layer, the outer layer, and we can calculate the thickness, and this makes information on how the brain is maturing. We can also look at the microstructure, like for example the white matter microstructure. This nice picture is about that, and this is how the water diffuse. And this is a marker of how the information is transmitting around the areas of the brain. And we can also look at the brain network connectivity, and is also an indicator of how the different areas are connecting. Even if we're standing still in the scan, the brain is still connecting. Then this is just, very briefly, things that we can explore how the brain is functioning. Then I had the privilege to work with this cohort, is the Generation R cohort in Rotterdam. They recruited around 10,000 families during pregnancy, and they did a pilot study of 1,000, which this, I would never define it as a pilot, but yeah. It was a huge pilot to see if this would work, if the families would accept to put their children in a scan for 40-45 minutes. And this was extremely successful, and as you can see, they kept going. And I've been working on the first 3 waves. This is just finished, and they are cleaning, and they started. And it's the largest population-based MRI cohort in the world. And then I was very curious because what they did first the kids go to a mock scan. This is the mock scan. This was at the first. And at the beginning, 15% of the kids decided to stop because the kids were allowed to stop before entering, during, or after even. And this was 80% of the families rated that it was very okay going to the scan. And here, if you can see, this is the level of anxiety before the mock scan, after, and after the real MRI. As you can see, the level of anxiety of the child is much lower than the family and the researchers. That everything was going well. Actually, it went very well because the response rate here is amazing. I mean, that's a huge amount of data. Then I will present some of the results I look at with air pollution. I thought, oh, that's perfect if we can look how air pollution might affect this. I will make a summary. We first published with the first data, let's say here. And we saw that higher air pollution levels, which will be the red one, would have, was related to a lowest hippocampal volume. At that age, we found more results, lowest, like a kind of impairment or several areas of the brain. But when we look at the 3 time points longitudinal data, we could see that all the results were disappearing. Then what does that mean? First we said, okay, it's good. Air pollution might be bad for you, but the brain is enough plastic to recover, which is good news because a lot of the population worldwide is exposed to high levels of air pollution, much, much higher than this cohort. But we discussed also with psychiatrists, and they also said that having an impairment at early ages, even later the brain recovers, maybe this can also have a functional damage later in life. Then this would be the 2 hypotheses. We will need to see in the future what happens. We also look at the white matter microstructure, and it was a bit the same. This is 2 different markers. I will not go into details because it's a bit complicated, but for this marker, higher air pollution was related to a lower white matter microstructure development, and this was constant across the age groups. But this other marker, that higher air pollution is related to higher, but this means also impaired white matter because it goes in the other direction, this one kind of catch up and recover. Then depending on the indicator we are looking, it could be, all this is surviving multiple testing correction because we are looking at a lot of outcomes at the same time. When we look at the brain, like this is for the white matter results at early ages, just to see, is this a regional effect or a whole brain effect? More or less, yeah, there is some specificities, but we consider it's quite global. But when we compare with other literature, they claim to have regional effects. Then this is just to point it out that each paper just brings a complete different conclusion. They also look at the association differently. Then it's very, very difficult to try to summarize this in a meta-analysis because there is different techniques to look at the imaging. It's a completely different world. Then they look at different regions, but then it's a mixed bag also of results. And the last one we were interested was in the functional connectivity, how the different brain networks are connecting. And here we found some impairment in this, the connection of these areas at early air pollution, and actually these areas are mostly developed in the first years of life. Then we found also this connection. What I said, other studies on the topic, there is no replication, but also because they just look at other parts of the brain and differently, then it's very, very difficult. I think we need to work all together to try to see if results replicate or not. But do these findings matter? Does it mean anything, or something happens a bit in the brain? These are very small effects and nothing happens in the brain. This was also one of the first papers published where they found like this kind of mediation. It was not a formal mediation, but they said, okay, higher exposure prenatally that they measured in the 3rd trimester. The women were wearing a backpack. This was a study in New York City. Then they found a reduction of the white matter surface, and then they found an impairment of, they call it information processing speed. This is a cognitive test to see how fast you are thinking, let's say, just to summarize it very quickly. Then the connections in the brain if it goes fast. And this was very beautiful, but they check a lot of other outcomes. They didn't correct for multiple testing, but this is what they found. And we tried to replicate the same in Generation R. We only found something at the early ages, what I said, that we also found more effects. And we also found a reduction of the inhibitory control, like children had a bit more difficulties to inhibit their impulses. This was a cognitive test they checked. But we have not been able to find other more functional effects at later ages. Also, we found less effects on the brain. Then let's see what happens, because they are following this cohort now at 20, 22 years old. Let's see how it goes. Let's go a bit to review some, there is a lot, some methodological challenges. For me, one of the first one is I think we need to work more together to try to replicate and using larger sample size. And this was an attempt a lot of years ago. 2008, it was this European project funded, SCAPE, where they did European maps of air pollution, like the old version that was very fancy back then, but now it has been improved a lot. And then we had 11 cohorts, and we tried to harmonize different brain outcomes, cognitive function, psychomotor, and also we had huge ADHD data, 20,000, almost 30,000, autistic traits, aggressive behavior, depression, anxiety. The data sets were huge. And it was all nothing, except a bit a delay on the psychomotor function, as you can see here. This is not corrected for multiple testing, correction then, but we found this small delay here. And here is the result of the meta-analysis with this small, minus 0.68. But as you can see, yeah, not all the cohorts are very consistent. But I think it's nice to go in that direction on trying to work together and harmonizing exposure and try to harmonize in outcomes. Because I explained yesterday in the lecture, to harmonize this, it was very, very difficult because everybody just had the idea to use a different questionnaire. And then the items are not matching properly. Then I think in the brain development world, we need to work a bit more together, I think, on trying to harmonize more. Another issue, I didn't go deep, but we have multiple exposure. I didn't go deep, but we have a lot of different air pollutants. And each project or each paper or each cohort just estimates a different one. This is just in Generation R, for this European project, we had a lot of air pollutants, and we also have high correlation. As you can see here, all these ones is almost 0.8. 0.9. This is just exactly almost the same. That's why in this project we say, okay, what we are looking at traffic-related air pollutants. Maybe we cannot differentiate this PM2.5 or NO2 or PM10. Let's talk about traffic-related air pollution. And then if you want to study windows of vulnerability, what's more relevant? Air pollution during first trimester, third trimester, first years of life, 10 years of life. If you are not moving from your house and the resolution is not good enough, correlation is 1. And we were lucky in the Netherlands, people are moving a lot. Then correlation childhood pregnancy was 0.6, which 0.5, 0.6, which I think is quite moderate. In our Spanish birth cohort is 0.8. No one changes house, then you have exactly the same air pollution level if the levels are not changing in the city, of course. Then how can you explore windows of vulnerability if you have exactly the same exposure all time? This is another challenge we have. And also what happens when you have so many correlated exposures, you try to disentangle. There have been some methods comparing different multipollutant, and then you can see which ones have a higher sensitivity and lower false discovery rate. This is the one method you can use the best, but that's not ideal, I can tell. Then I think there's a lot of work also if you want to disentangle between pollutants. You can try to put 2 by 2, 3 by 3, but if correlation is very high, maybe you're just looking at the same all time. And the outcomes, of course, we have a lot of outcomes. This is just a summary, because I went just highlighting few results. In the cross-sectional, the first data we had in Generation R, we look at everything, and this is a summary table of all the outcomes where we found something, which pollutants, this is in the single, and then we try to do a multi-pollutant model, and then it's almost impossible to take a conclusion from here, I would say. Then I think we need to go a bit more targeted on this research, and joining with other studies. And yeah, multiple outcomes. I just presented something, but if you, we did this with psychologists, okay, try to map it, what can be the clinical outcomes or the functional domains we could study during childhood is multiple, and this could be even larger. Then this also makes a complexity. Air pollution is affecting ADHD and not autism. Why? Which region of the brain is affected? Or the air pollution, then it becomes even more complex. I've been studying air pollution and brain the last 18 years, and I found it more complex now than when I started. But okay, this would be my overall conclusion, my personal. I think air pollution has been associated with several outcomes. Even it's not completely concordant, it's quite consistent. But depending on the different study, they can have different results, different air pollutants. But I really think air pollution might affect the brain. Maybe we don't know exactly which pollutant in which region, but I think there is quite consistent on that. But still, we don't know which could be the functional implications these children, when they grow, how they will perform. And I think this is very important because it's which actually at the end it matters, even if they have some impairment in the white matter, but if later they can function perfectly, I think it will be fine. And the challenges, as I summarize, a lot of fundings have been published in few studies. I also think there is a lot of publication bias, because I cannot believe most of the studies at the beginning are everybody's funding associations, and then every now and then there is one negative. I think we need to be a bit more honest, and if results are not as nice as we think, I think they need to be published. Then we have all these issues, what I mentioned about highly correlated pollutants. The outcomes measure and the analytical approach is still not harmonized, and this also limits the comparability. And most of the studies, a lot, not all, they are in the global north, which we have relatively better air pollution levels. Then I think they're missing part of the world still on that research. Then let's go to temperature. That's my new topic, my new baby. And you can have seen these days, you are suffering from this increased temperature. This was, the last 3 years have been in the record here. And actually, if you talk to psychiatrists, they know this day, with this heat here in Florence, in the hospital, they will have more people going with mental health disorders. They know it. If you talk to them, they know it. And this has been shown in some papers. There is a higher mortality in people with mental health disorders, also higher hospital attendance and emergency rooms, and especially higher suicide and suicidal behavior. Suicidal behavior means suicidal attempts or ideation. They have not committed the suicide, but they think about it. And psychiatrists know this already. Then I think we need to go one step further, that not waiting 20 years of research to do something. I think I'm claiming now also to act a bit earlier also. Then with young adults, there is less research, but there is still some that they show that higher, this was in New Zealand, higher temperatures also have been related with higher suicide and suicidal behavior. And in another study, they found also that colder temperatures, especially in younger ages, could also be related to higher mental health emergency visits. We tried to replicate this in Europe, and we took Generation R, and we also took our Spanish cohort, because in Spain we have higher temperature levels than in the Netherlands. And it was curious, this was in the Netherlands, where we found the colder temperatures related to internalizing problems. In the young, they still have not been diagnosed of depression and anxiety, but we call it internalizing problems. This is depression and anxiety symptoms, let's say, as a summary. And in Spain, it was higher temperatures related to higher attention problems. We don't know why these different results. It could be chance finding. It could be an indication, yeah, they have lower temperatures in the Netherlands, maybe why this could pop up, and higher temperatures in Spain. But it would be nice to replicate. That's the first study, and there is no one else that has been looking at that at this age range. Then it could be nice to try to replicate. Then which could be the mechanisms explaining that? Sleep alterations. Here we have air conditioning, but I'm not sure if you have tried to sleep without air conditioning with this temperature. It's hard in general. It has been shown in animal studies that it can have inflammation also, especially heat, but also cold exposure. They might also have brain structural and functional alteration and epigenetic changes. Then, so far, I only had time to go through the brain. Then we used the Generation R cohort, and for the white matter, we found that both cold and heat was related at the first year of life to an impairment of this white matter structure. Then we tried to stratify by neighborhood SES, because I think the role of social inequalities, especially with temperature, can be very strong. Who is putting air conditioning in their houses, especially in the countries that they have not been having air conditioning? This is not the same based on your income level, let's say. And then we found this association mostly in the low neighborhood SES, although in the high it's a bit the same shape, but it's just a bit stronger in the low neighborhood SES. We also found also during pregnancy this slower growth of the thalamus. This is corrected for multiple testing. That's why we also find some other results, but I don't highlight it. Because, yeah, in this imaging, you have so many outcomes that you are looking together that you need to be a bit careful on that. And this is what the nicest one I found. And it was published in a psychiatry journal, the highest in the adolescence and childhood. We found the week before exposure, the brain functional connectivity within these three areas. And this one is nice because this one has been related to suicide and suicidal behavior. Then we don't have yet this data in this cohort, but it would be very nice to see if we can find a mediation with that. And this is, I found it very interesting to find exactly this result. This also is very nice because in animal studies, they found that heat is being related with hippocampus. Then I think this paper I found very was found it very nice because it was a bit confirming a bit other type of literature, more the psychiatric literature and also the animal studies. Then for me, this is very, very initial work. I've been working these last 2, 3, 4 years. Then I'm already finding very difficult how to work with the temperature. This was some initial analysis, what we thought it made sense, but now I'm reconsidering. We need to think about it because, yeah, you keep having heat waves in your life. How do you put this in a model, in a statistical model? How you can count on that? If you survive the first heat wave and then you go to the other, what does it mean? Are you more resilient? And this happened the same with other outcomes. Mortality, they have always been working on short term, but I know the community is already thinking on the long term. If you have us 5 months, now we have a very long 5 months of heat waves continuously in a lot of countries. What happens with mortality? If you die the first one or you die in the last one, how do you take all these accumulative effects in your model or to see, or biologically, how this is affecting? To translate this biology in the statistical modeling, I found it still very, very complex. This is what we call it in a small group. We work on that, yeah. We could have the short-term effects, the medium-term, like let's say the month before, the year before, and the long-term. And each one might have a different biological mechanism, but I think the most complex is how to materialize that statistically, let's say, to be able to analyze it then. Let's see, the coming years, we have a small group, we are working on that, let's see if we do it. And the other thing for me is very, very important, that we have this huge measurement error with temperature because we are inside now with the airco. It's beautiful, but this how we can include indoor in our huge cohorts that you cannot spend so much money putting devices, continuous devices, because temperature is varying daily, hourly. Then this was, I just put a very old paper that they show, this is Boston, this happens in a lot of places. People, for a lot of years, start having heating. That's why the temperature outdoor, it goes down in winter, and it maintains quite constant in winter. People have heating, but they don't have so much airco, and then outdoor and indoor correlates better in summer than in winter. This could happen probably now in the Nordic countries, where the air conditioning is still not so prevalent, but this will change. And soon everybody will have air conditioning. I think there was a study in Barcelona. I have not seen the data, but I think the houses have constant temperature the entire year because everybody has or heating or air conditioning. And if you live inside, then you can measure outside. It's very good to know outdoor temperature for public health recommendations, but if people are just inside, I'm not so sure. Then I think this is a big issue we need to tackle. Then I'm going to finish. This is my own conclusion on what's known on temperature and brain development. There is consistent evidence in adults, but very, very few studies in younger ages, and I think it's very important because the brain at that age might be more vulnerable than older adults. There is very initial evidence on brain development and imaging, still very little on how the functional implications of these changes, and I think socioeconomic inequalities could play a larger role. And for the challenges, I think I put a more, you don't see much the things, but it's more to start doing measures, social and individual, for heat adaptation, that not waiting that we are showing this is damaging the brain, but I think we can start acting earlier than for other exposures. And then just my last slide on opportunities. I think we need to improve exposure assessment, especially in temperature. I think in air pollution has been a huge development the last 10, 20 years, but with temperature, I think going into the indoor and analytical approach, at least for me, is still very challenging. I think having all this longitudinal brain data is luxurious, and this is perfect because we can see how the brain is growing and we can try to understand. It would be nice to have this in other countries. because in the US now they are going for the third wave. They also have a huge cohort that we can access now, again, their data. Then it would be very nice, this. I think it's very good also to look at implications of the findings later, to try to combine what I say, data for a lot of different regions and countries, and include a bit more the Global South in our studies, and to evaluate, always having in mind these socioeconomic inequalities that I think are very important, and already thinking on individual and social adaptation solutions. Some things we could do for temperature is to try to implement measures and to evaluate them if they are efficient, and then to work more on the implementation and the evaluation of policies, not so much maybe studying the potential health effects, but just to see if things, you can very easily, well, very easily, more easy to assess sleep or some mental health symptoms, and see if implementation of adaptation solutions make change in the population, and then to invest a bit more on that, this would be. And my last methodological challenge, just to finish, because I wanted to make it a bit more methodological, this is probably you have been hearing about this fantastic exposome. I've been talking about separate exposure, and I think this is a huge methodological challenge, and I think I just want to give a brief note. If you go wide, I think don't forget about the conceptual thinking and the confounding structure, because going like this is very easy to start adjusting for mediators and to put everything together and lose a bit the big picture. Then this is my take-home message. If you go a bit wider than one exposure after another, please take care of the conceptual thinking and the confounding structure, which is very, very important. And thank you. That's all.